Good afternoon, boys and girls. I am here to read Paddington to you a little bit. Before I start, I just want to say thank you for all of the birthday wishes today. It was so special to see your pictures and your cards, and some of you even sent videos. It really touched my heart, and I was not expecting that at all. So I was very surprised to see that, and thank you very much. So let's see what Mr. Paddington's up to today. Need my reading glasses. All right. Paddington and the Old Master. Paddington soon settled down and became one of the family. In fact, in no time at all, it was difficult to imagine what life had been like without him. He made himself useful about the house, and the days passed quickly. The Browns lived near the Portobello Road, where there was a big market, and quite often when Mrs. Brown was busy, she let him go out to do the shopping for her. Mr. Brown made a shopping trolley for him, an old basket on wheels with a handle for steering it. Paddington was a good shopper, and soon became well known to all of the traders in the market. He was very thorough and took the job of shopping seriously. He would press the fruit to see that it had the right degree of firmness, as Mrs. Bird had shown him, and he was always on the lookout for bargains. He was a popular bear with the traders, and most of them went out of their way to save the best things of the day for him. "That bear gets more for his 10 pence than anyone I know," said Mrs. Bird. "I don't know how he gets away with it. Really, I don't. It must be the mean streak in him." "I'm not mean," said Paddington indignantly. "I'm just careful, that's all." "Whatever it is," replied Mrs. Bird, "you're worth your weight in gold." Paddington took this remark very seriously and spent a long time weighing himself on the bathroom scales. Eventually, he decided to consult his friend Mr. Grubber on the subject. Oh my gosh, boys and girls, I just had a text-to-text connection. When Mrs. Bird tells Paddington that he's worth his weight in gold, she doesn't really mean that he's worth his weight in gold. It just means that he's very valuable to the family. It reminds me of when we were reading Junie B. Jones, and her grandma told her that her baby brother was the cutest monkey that she had ever seen, and the boys and girls at school and Junie B really thought that her baby brother was a monkey. Do you remember that? That is a text-to-text connection. Let's keep going. Now, Paddington spent a lot of his time looking in the shop window, and of all the windows in the Portobello Road, Mr. Grubber's was the best. For one thing, it was nice and low so that he could look in without having to stand on tiptoe. And for another, it was full of interesting things. Old pieces of furniture, medals, pots and pans, pictures. There were so many things, it was difficult to get inside the shop. And old Mr. Grubber spent a lot of his time sitting in a desk chair on the pavement. Mr. Grubber, in his turn, found Paddington very interesting, and soon they had become great friends. Paddington often stopped there on his way home from a shopping expedition, and they spent many hours discussing South America, where Mr. Grubber had been when he was a boy. Mr. Grubber usually had a bun and a cup of cocoa in the morning for what he called his eleveness, and he had taken to sharing it with Paddington. There was nothing like a nice chat over a bun and a cup of cocoa, he used to say, and Paddington, who liked all three, agreed with him, even though the cocoa did make his whiskers get a funny color. Paddington was always interested in bright things, and he had consulted Mr. Grubber one morning on the subject of his Peruvian centavos. He had an idea. His centavos are coins that he has from Peru. He had an idea in the back of his mind that if they were worth a lot of money, he could perhaps sell them and buy a present for the Browns. The 1 pound a week pocket money Mr. Brown gave him was nice, but by the time he had bought some buns on a Saturday morning, there wasn't much left. After a great deal of consideration, Mr. Grubber had advised Paddington to keep the coins. It's not always the brightest things that fetch the most money, Mr. Brown, he had said. Mr. Grubber always called Paddington Mr. Brown, and it made him feel very important. He had taken Paddington into the back of the shop where his desk was, and from a drawer he had taken a cardboard box full of old coins. They had been rather dirty and disappointing. See these, Mr. Brown, he had said. These are what they call souvenirs. You wouldn't think that they were very valuable to look at them, but they are. They're made of gold, and they're worth 50 pounds each. That's more than 100 pounds for an ounce. If you ever find any of those, just you bring them to me. One day, having weighed himself carefully on the scales, Paddington hurried round to Mr. Grubber, taking with him a piece of paper from his scrapbook covered with mysterious calculations. After a big meal on a Sunday, Paddington had discovered that he weighed nearly 16 pounds. That was, he looked at his piece of paper again as he neared Mr. Grubber's shop, that was nearly 260 ounces, which meant that he was worth nearly 26,000 pounds. Mr. Grubber listened carefully to all that Paddington had to tell him, and then closed his eyes and thought for a moment. He was a kindly man, and he didn't want to disappoint Paddington. "I've no doubt," he said at last, "that you're worth that. You're obviously a very valuable young bear. I know it. Mr. and Mrs. Brown know it. Mrs. Bird knows it. But do other people?" He looked at Paddington over his glasses. "Things aren't always what they seem in this world, Mr. Brown," he said sadly. Paddington sighed. "It was very disappointing. I wish they were," he said. "It would be nice." "Perhaps," said Mr. Grubber mysteriously. "Perhaps. But we shouldn't have any nice surprises then, should we?" He took Paddington into his shop, and after offering him a seat, disappeared for a moment. And we will read more about that tomorrow. I hope you guys have a great afternoon, and I'll see you later. Bye.